Chapter 18. Sarah's heart raced as the elevator slowly descended to the ground. Can't this thing move any faster? She needed to find Vincent and find out what was going on. The longer they spent on this leisurely ride, the further away Vincent got. Finally the doors opened and she rushed out, colliding with Daniel's solid form. Sarah shoved Daniel hard, but he wouldn't budge. His arms snatched hers and held her in place. Please stop. You're going to make a scene, he pleaded, his face strained and angry. Sarah ignored him, thrashing about to get free. She didn't care if people were staring. How could Daniel just let Vincent leave with Malachi? What is he thinking? What is Vincent thinking? She and Vincent had agreed to stick together. Sarah, Nora soothed, touching her arm. We need to leave. This isn't helping Vincent. Is everything okay here? A man asked as he approached, eyeing the three of them wearily. Sarah froze, looking at Nora and then Daniel. She closed her eyes and quickly composed herself. Nora was right, having a breakdown in the park wouldn't help. Vincent. It's fine, she replied, her voice coming out smoothly despite her frazzled nerves. The man quirked a brow, as if he were uncertain of her answer. Sarah swallowed. He wasn't buying it. She needed to say something else. It's my boyfriend. He is doing something stupid. He's not allowed to ride coasters for health reasons, but did so anyway, she blurted. Sarah held her breath as the man shifted his gaze to Daniel, who promptly released her arms. Sarah instantly stepped back, only to bump into Nora. If you're sure, the man queried. I am. Thank you, she assured, mustering up a genuine smile. At least he'd been kind enough to step in when he thought something was wrong. Daniel motioned her and Nora forward with his hand. Come on, let's go meet up with Vincent, he said. Sarah waved at the kind stranger before speed walking after Daniel. Her mind raced as they zigzagged through the park. There was a plan, surely they had a plan. Even if they were clueless, she fully intended on asking questions the second they got to the car. Her heart sped up as they hurried through the exit. The walk to the car was excruciating. Anger and terror clouded her vision. Something happened to Vincent. She didn't think she could take it. He was her rock, her trusted friend, a confidant, the man she loved. Wait, love? Did she love him? Her mind reeled at the revelation and she stumbled, tripping over her own feet. The way she felt about Vincent could only be summed up with one word. Love. She'd be damned if something happened to Vincent before they could truly explore their connection. Sarah. Nora's voice snapped her out of her thoughts. Over here. Her face burned with anger. She'd been so consumed by her thoughts she'd bypassed the car. Sarah scrambled to catch up to the couple as Daniel opened the door. She jogged to the car and hopped into the back seat. What happened? She demanded the second the door shut. Daniel met her gaze in the mirror as he started the car. Malachi insisted. Vincent go with him to ensure I give him Natalia, he explained, craning his neck as he backed up. Sarah frowned, confused. But we're not giving him Talia. Where is he taking Vincent? Her bottom lip trembled and she closed her eyes. Vincent needed to be okay. No, we're not giving him Natalia, Daniel stated. Malachi said he'd be by tomorrow night to collect her. He's going to pay Charles Luna a surprise visit today. We are going to New Mexico right now to intervene and make sure we get Vincent back. We're going to carry through with our part of the plan and take out Luna and Malachi tonight so we can rescue Vincent, he assured sincerely. Sarah sat back in the seat as some of her fear subsided. They were going to get Vincent right now. Everything would be okay by tonight, she hoped. Nora cleared her throat. Are we going to get back up? Sarah watched, wondering the same thing as Daniel scrubbed a hand over his face. He blew out a long breath. The more people we have in New Mexico, the more likely our plan is to fail. We don't know when Luna and Malachi will be in the same spot again. Daniel's gaze drifted to Sarah's again. Are you as good a shot as Lark? Yes, she answered determinedly. We have the long-range rifle in the back. I'm really good with it. Can you take out Charles Luna, his eldest son, Chip, and Malachi? Daniel wondered. Sarah bit her lip. She was a quick shot, but wolves were fast on their feet. I can back her up after she gets the first shot off, Nora offered. We'll have to be fast, Sarah thought aloud. But we can do this, she said confidently. They would do this. Vincent looked out the window as they exited the parking lot. He'd hoped to catch at least a glimpse of Sarah to let her know he was okay, but he had no such luck. The only comfort he had was that Daniel would look out for her and that his brothers Sarah and Nora would come for him. He would see Sarah again soon. He just hoped that when he saw her she wouldn't be too angry. They had promised to stick together and, currently, he wasn't following along with that plan. But he and Daniel hadn't been given much of a choice. If they had refused, they would have lost the entire deal. You'll be reunited with your little girlfriend soon enough as long as your brother delivers my sister, Malachi sneered from the front passenger seat. Vincent shifted in his seat so he could stare into the back of Malachi's head. The alpha thought he was so smug. Well, he had another thing coming. Do you not like me talking about your girl? Malachi pressed. She is your girl, right? I can smell her all over you. Pretty little thing. Vincent ground his teeth but could not suppress the small growl that escaped his lips. He balled his hands into tight fists. If it were just him and Malachi in the car, he would take him on. The alpha wasn't too much larger than he was, but it wasn't just the two of them. There was the driver and two of Malachi's goons squished in the back seat with him. Shame she isn't a part of the deal, Malachi persisted. Vincent closed his eyes and counted to 10. If he lashed out, he would only give the other men what they wanted. He needed to sit back and bide his time. Any wrong move on his part could seriously screw up their plans. He would not let Malachi goad him into something that could hurt Sarah. Sarah was... He couldn't even think of words to describe her, but he knew he would kill anyone who tried to harm her. I know his friend is off the table for the moment, but what about her older sister? The driver asked, smirking as he turned to Malachi. Vincent swallowed and turned his head to look out the window. Listen, but don't react, he reminded himself. Malachi huffed loudly. Let's see how it plays out tomorrow. Natalia's actions against her own father are unforgivable. Family should never turn on each other. I would love to make her pay for Fernando's death, but I gave my word. We would leave their pack alone in exchange for Natalia. However they decide not to cooperate, it will not end well for them, Malachi chuckled. I think I might like to sample both the Davies women. They certainly have the werewolf spirit, if not the ability to shift. I always do like a good challenge. Is it true they descended from werewolves? Vincent asked before he could stop himself. It was a stupid question, he shouldn't be engaging them, but Sarah and Lark would want to know. I didn't realize you were privy to that information, Malachi replied, shifting in his seat. My father wrote a lot of things down, but I thought you would have caught on to that by now, he chastised. Does it make her more appealing to you? Malachi inquired, cocking his head to the side. Vincent pursed his lips and remained silent. He wasn't going to answer any questions like that. The more obscene Malachi became, the harder it was to believe the alpha would truly keep his word. Doubt gnawed at his belly as he let out a long breath. Your silence only goes to show me how much you care for her. But to answer your question, yes, Malachi grinned. Luckily for you, my need to avenge my father is greater than my desire for her. Vincent turned back to the window. All this talk doesn't make me too comfortable that you intend to keep your word regarding my brother and Jean's pack, he said, voicing his concern. If this was the case, then he needed to find a way to alert Daniel so he could get Sarah home and warn the pack. Malachi had come to the park prepared, and he didn't want Sarah caught up in all this. A small motorcade joined them as soon as they hopped onto the main road. So far he counted 5 identical white Toyota 4Runners. Malachi was not going into this meeting with Luna alone. That could either go well for him and his companions or very, very gravely. I admire those who keep their word. Mind yourself for the next 24 hours and your pretty blonde lover will remain unscathed. As long as the Harris pack stay out of my way and I get my sister without issue, my word is good. Malachi snipped before turning abruptly in his seat. Vincent still had a hard time believing Malachi, but if everything went according to their plan, it wouldn't matter anyway. Between Daniel, Sarah, Nora, and him, they were going to pull this off. Sarah bounced her leg up and down impatiently. The winding road they were on seemed vaguely familiar. She and Vincent had driven down this road a few days prior when they'd been outrunning the Lunas. They were close to Vincent. Her heart sped up, and she scooted forward in her seat, eager to reach him. We're getting close, she whispered to herself as they passed a large red barn. She definitely remembered seeing that. Yeah, Daniel agreed. If I recall correctly, the house is about 25 miles east of here. 25? Sarah questioned. She hadn't realized she and Vincent covered so much ground while they were running from the Lunas. It's been a few years since I've been this way. I could be off, Daniel admitted. How close are we going to get? Last time we parked and walked. Nora murmured. We will have to walk and take care to mask our scent, Daniel replied. Great, Sarah sighed, but couldn't quite contain her smile. There is nothing better than smearing dirt and leaves on yourself. Yeah, sounds fun, Nora laughed. Charles Luna allows no one to just drive up to his house. He always stops visitors at the guard station. He'll greet Malachi there, and that is where we need to be to take him out, Daniel explained. But how do we know he's not already on the property and at the house? Sarah asked, concerned. They only had a 10-minute head start, if that. We took the scenic longer route here. But at the speed we drove, I'm confident we beat them here, Daniel said, scrubbing a hand over his face. Were we speeding? She hadn't been paying attention. Not that it mattered, getting here and executing their idea was the goal. We're going to park up here and walk. We need to make good time, so move quickly, Daniel said. Sarah gripped the front headrest tightly and drew herself closer to the front seat, her eyes trained on the road ahead. Only a few more minutes and this would be over. Finally, Vincent slowly climbed out of the white SUV he'd been riding in all day. His muscles groaned in protest, straining from being in one position for too long. He wiped his clammy hands on his jeans as Luna's men approached. He inhaled sharply, wondering if Daniel, Sarah, and Nora were somewhere close. He hoped so. All he wanted to do was hold Sarah and get home to Abilene. Where we will do what? He wondered. Will we have a relationship or go back to being friends? The latter wasn't an option. He couldn't be just friends with Sarah. As if to taunt him further, Sarah's heavenly cinnamon scent lingered in the air. He cursed under his breath and clenched his fists tightly, surveying his surroundings. She wasn't in plain sight, and the Lunas and Malachi didn't seem to notice. Perhaps his mind was playing tricks on him, but when the wind blew again, the scent was stronger. His heart sped up as his eyes darted around. If he could smell her, so could everyone else. But the two warring packs continued to talk, completely clueless. Sarah was here, he was sure of it. Was he that in tune with her that he could sense her from far away? Had her scent ingrained itself into him? Holy crap. Is she my mate? Oddly enough, the thought was comforting, not terrifying. He'd only just begun to process the information when a loud pop rang out. Before he could fully process what was happening, a body collided with his, dragging him to the ground. He grunted as something pierced his side and tore its way through his flesh. Warmth spread across his middle. Fight back. His adrenaline kicked up a notch as he willed his hands to change. He wasn't going down without resistance. Mid-shift, he reached his hands up to push his attacker away. His pulse roared and his heart skipped a beat when the man above him howled in pain. He released a relieved breath, realizing his quick action had caught the other man off guard. Don't get cocky now. Keep going before he reacts. Taking full advantage of his enemy's surprise, he lifted his hips and rolled himself on top of his bloodied assailant. With a quick swipe of his claws, he slashed the man's throat. Triumphant, he reeled back, readying for another attack, but none came. The other wolves had taken cover in the bushes and trees to avoid the spray of bullets. He lunged forward and completed his shift, ready to take on the Lunas and Malachi to finally end. Chapter 19. Sarah positioned the rifle against her shoulder and quickly found Charles Luna in the scope. Inhaling deeply, she let out her breath as her finger curled around the trigger. The rifle popped loudly, causing her ears to ring. The alpha slumped to the ground as the other men backed away from their fallen leader. She blinked, reloading as she aimed, and fired again before Chip Luna could scurry into the safety of the trees. 2 down, 1 to go. Where is Malachi? She used her scope to locate the last alpha. The coward scurried through the brush on his hands and knees, making his way to a car. No, no, no. I can't let him get away. Sarah scrambled up the hill, trying to get a good vantage point as Malachi and one of his goons jumped back into their vehicle. Determined not to let them get away, she aimed and let out a long breath as she watched the car fly backwards down the narrow drive. Malachi and one of his goons hopped in the car to escape. Steeling herself, she fired, hitting the driver. The car jerked to the left and careened off the gravel before colliding with a tree. A sickening crunch filled the air as steam billowed out from under the hood. She held her breath and repositioned. Malachi could not be allowed to escape. If he got away, no one would be safe. Charles Luna had been the first wolf she had taken out, and she'd quickly caught his eldest son. Now she just needed to get Malachi. She secured the rifle against her shoulder and honed in on the car. Where is he? Sarah. Over here, Nora shouted. It's Vincent. They're coming back out and attacking him, she said frantically. Sarah scrambled back over to Nora as her heart lurched painfully in her chest. Nothing can happen to him. Determined to protect Vincent, she positioned the gun and let off a shot, catching a wolf in its chest. The wolf dropped to the ground and she reloaded. Daniel striped his shirt off. I'm going down to get Vincent. Stay here and don't move. I'll be right back, he ordered. Please don't shoot me too. Sarah nodded, not taking her eyes off the wolf she was aiming for. She squeezed the trigger and quickly reloaded. The wolves were surrounding Vincent and she had to protect him. She fired again in rapid succession, quickly taking out more wolves as they flooded the area. But more wolves kept coming, and they didn't seem to care that she and Nora were shooting at them. Panic filled her as a pack of wolves circled around Vincent. She panted as she continued to fire, terrified something would happen to him. He was grossly outnumbered. Her heart stopped when a wolf dragged him to the ground and another pounced on top of him. No. Sarah forced a breath into her lungs and focused as she carefully aimed. Her mind raced and fear squeezed her chest. They were moving so fast, what if she missed and hit Vincent instead? Calm down. You've done this hundreds of times. Just not with someone else's life at stake. She swallowed down her fears and took the shot. The wolf attacking Vincent crumpled to the ground in a heap and Vincent stood up, casting a glance her way as Daniel made quick work of the other wolf. She smiled as relief flooded her. He is okay. Vincent snarled, the ferocious sound startling her as he lunged up the hill toward her. A hand snaked around her torso and yanked her backwards. Sarah screamed and thrashed wildly, keeping her grip on the gun tight. Her attacker hoisted her up and started dragging her backwards. Stop, Nora commanded, pointing her gun at the man who held her. You're not going to shoot me, the man rasped cockily. Nora wavered slightly, but quickly regained her composure. Her finger curled around the trigger and she pointed the barrel at them. Are you sure you won't shoot her by accident? The unknown man chuckled. Nora's gaze drifted to Sarah's, indecision clear in the redhead's eyes. Think. Do something. Her eyes fell on the rifle still in her hands. She clasped it tighter and ducked to the side, thrusting it backwards at the same time with all her might. The rifle connected with her captor's head with a sickening crack. He cursed and tossed her to the ground. The air whooshed out of her lungs as the butt of the rifle dug into her abdomen. Sarah gasped, attempting to force air into her screaming lungs. She needed to keep moving before he regained his composure. Too late, as a rough hand embedded in her hair, snatching her up harshly. Get off her! Nora screamed as she stampeded the captor, beating him with the back of her gun. The man shoved Sarah back to the ground, and she grimaced as hair tore free from her scalp from the action. You dumb bitch, he sneered. Sarah gasped as she pushed to her hands and knees. Her attacker was going after Nora now. His fist rose, readying to attack. The copper-headed femme raised her hands up, but not fast enough. The man's hand connected with her cheek, sending Nora toppling to the leafy ground. Rage filled Sarah as he walked menacingly toward Nora. He will not hurt. Another hair on her head. Without a second thought, she reached into her ankle holster and retrieved her gun. She pointed and fired seconds before the assailant smashed Nora's face with his boot. Nora screeched as the body fell onto her. Sarah rushed forward to help roll the man's lifeless form away. She fought to catch her breath as she helped Nora to her feet. They would both be okay, but where were Vincent and Daniel? It was time to leave. I need to reload, Nora said, fumbling in her pockets for more ammunition. Sarah clutched her gun tightly, scanning the woods for signs of Vincent or Daniel. Dozens of wolves fought brutally a few hundred feet in front of them, but none of them had the familiar auburn fur. At least the Lunas and Juarezes were taking care of each other, she thought as she continued to search for the two wolves that mattered to her. The leaves to their right rustled and Sarah tensed, lifting her gun as two wolves bounded out of the brush. She instantly recognized Vincent even though he and Daniel were almost the same fur color. It was his eyes that gave him away the way they instantly found hers. Vincent, Sarah breathed, closing her eyes. She kneeled to scratch behind his ears as he nuzzled her leg. He is fine, Daniel yipped, motioning with his head towards the road. Not needing any further explanation, the quartet took off to the car. They needed to call Gene and let him know what was going on. They were going home. Abilene, Texas. Lark took a seat on the opposite side of Gene's desk. It was unlike Gene to call both her and Devin away from their duties. Lark swallowed hard as Gene ran a tired hand through his hair. Something was wrong. She could tell by the nervous tick in his jaw and the way he wouldn't quite make eye contact with her or Devin. What is it, Gene? Devin asked impatiently, his hand unconsciously clasping hers a little tighter. Gene cleared his throat and looked to Devin, then to Lark. Daniel didn't take Nora to Mississippi. Lark frowned, her eyebrows rising in question. Okay, she drawled slowly. Why not? Gene licked his lips. You were right, Lark. Lark froze. Right about what? She closed her eyes and prayed it was about Sarah and Vincent. What else could he be talking about? I heard from Vincent and Sarah a few days ago, Gene confirmed. A strangled breath escaped her lips as tears burned her eyes. They are alive. Why didn't you say something? Devin snapped, standing up and leaning menacingly on Gene's desk. They didn't want me to, Gene answered. I'm sorry, but when they told me what they planned and why they didn't want you to know, I agreed to help. Why didn't she want me to know? Lark whispered quietly, meeting Gene's gaze. Because you are happy and safe here and she knew that you, both of you, he said, turning to Devin, would come rushing after them and put yourselves in danger. They went to Guyman and got evidence that Charles and Emmett were working together. They then met with Malachi. They what? Devin snarled. Gene's desk groaned under the death grip he had on. Lark bit her lip. She understood Devin's anger, but she also knew her sister. Sarah had always looked out for her as much as she could. It was what they did for each other. They pitted Charles, Luna, and Malachi against each other and it worked, Gene explained. Lark blinked and stood up. Her heart raced rapidly against her chest as she waited for Gene to continue. Charles Luna and Chip Luna are both dead. When they left, the two packs were fighting each other. There's just one problem. Devin looked to Lark and then to Gene. What's that? They aren't sure if Malachi made it out alive or not, Gene explained with a heavy sigh. But Vincent and Sarah are okay? Lark asked, clasping onto the desk tightly. She held her breath, waiting for Gene's answer. Yes. Lark closed her eyes, letting the tears finally fall. You should have told us what they were doing, Devin grumbled, wrapping his arms around her comfortingly. Lark shook her head against his chest. She was upset he'd kept this secret from them, but in the end it didn't matter. Her baby sister was alive. In order for their plan to work, they couldn't have Malachi or anyone else feeling threatened. And they didn't want the Lunas to know our pack was there, too. But if Malachi is alive, he will come here and I am positive it will be very soon, Gene admitted. That's why you put the men on the perimeter before we came in here, Devin acknowledged. Gene nodded. Daniel called. They are on their way here. Lark squeezed Devin tighter. Sarah would be here soon. Sarah stretched in the back seat. They were only a few short minutes from the Harris Ranch. She would see her sister again. Tears pricked her eyes with apprehension. Will Lark be mad at me? She hoped not. Vincent bumped his leg up and down, no doubt just as anxious as she was. The car was charged with energy and had been ever since they crossed over the county line into Abilene. Her misgivings were apparent in her body language. It wasn't quite over yet. Malachi was still out there and he would be coming to the ranch sooner rather than later. Still, she hoped they had at least a few days of reprieve. They could use a break, it would help calm their frayed nerves. Could you stop, please? Daniel grumbled from the front seat, looking pointedly at Vincent in the rearview mirror. You're shaking the entire car. Vincent halted his movements and Sarah turned to look at him, carefully taking his hand in hers. She met his eyes with a warm smile. It's going to be okay. I know, he grinned. The smile was tight and uneasy and didn't quite reach his eyes. Sarah opened her mouth to reply when something slammed into the driver's side of the car. She gasped as she was thrown to the right. Vincent's head knocked against hers and she yelped in pain as the vehicle whirled around. What the hell? Her body was thrust forward, stopped only by the seatbelt, and then wrenched back. When the vehicle finally came to a halt, she fought to breathe and clear her foggy brain. Sarah, Vincent choked. His hands cupped her head, saving her from the swirling sensation that threatened to take her under. Yeah, I'll live, she answered automatically. Daniel. Nora groaned, her hand reaching for the other wolf. Go get out, Daniel yelled, unbuckling Nora's belt for her. The car door creaked as Nora opened it. Sarah forced even breaths through her mouth, trying to focus on her surroundings. Smoke billowed up from Daniel's vehicle and she could make out a white SUV that almost seemed to be fused to Daniel's. Her vision blackened for a moment and she inhaled sharply. She needed to stay awake. She had to be in control. Come on, Sarah, Daniel instructed, yanking the passenger seat forward and offering her his hand. Sarah blinked, wondering how he'd gotten out of the car. She needed to wake up. His arm grasped hers and he pulled her out as Vincent shoved her from the back seat, chasing after her. She swayed on her feet, and Vincent wrapped an arm around her, cupping her face with his hands. Focus on me, Vincent demanded. Sarah's eyes blurred, but she followed his voice and blinked, staring into his emerald eyes. I need you to run. Get as close to the ranch as you can while Daniel and I hold these guys off. Can't leave you, she argued incoherently. You will, he snapped, shaking her slightly. The only thing that can save us is the pack. Go with Nora. Now. If she didn't get it together, Vincent would die. Sarah fought through the haze. Blinking, she righted herself and pulled free from his grasp. Sarah stumbled forward a few feet before finding her footing. You're coming home, she insisted. I promise, Vincent replied before lunging forward, his clothes shredding and falling to the ground as he transitioned. Here, you take this, Nora instructed, handing Sarah a handgun as Vincent joined Daniel, who was already fighting off wolves. Together, she and Nora raced away from the fight toward the ranch. They were only a few miles out. All they had to do was get close enough for someone to hear them. If they could do that, help would be on the way. We have to get help. Vincent dying was not an option and Daniel had risked his life for hers as well. She owed it both wolves to get help. These thoughts pushed her to go faster. Her feet pounded on the blacktop. Hope was just ahead and she was going to make it there. A loud thump followed by a pained hiss stopped her in her tracks. She spun as a burly man shoved Nora to the ground from behind. Clenching her teeth, Sarah raised the gun up and aimed it at the menacing enemy. Her finger curled around the trigger as enmity clouded her vision. She had enough. They'd come too far to lose now. The gun clicked. She flustered, squeezing the trigger again. Nothing happened. It was jammed. Shit. She took a few steps back as her mind raced, trying to sort out a plan. Her back collided with something hard and she shrieked in panic as arms wrapped around her. I told him not to betray me, an accented voice she instantly recognized drawled. Malachi, I am going to enjoy you, he whispered against her neck. Sarah's skin crawled and vomit rose her throat. No, 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 she thrashed in his arms, but his grip only tightened, crushing her so forcefully she could only wheeze. It's not over. Doesn't end like this. Think. Keep it down and come nicely and I'll go easy on you, he mocked into her ear. Sarah cringed as her mind raced. Wait, he'd said to keep it quiet. They needed to keep the noise down because werewolves have sensitive hearing. If I'm loud enough, they can hear me at the ranch. Sarah drew in as deep a breath as she could muster and shrieked as loudly as possible. A heavy hand clamped painfully over her mouth, causing her teeth to mash against her bottom lip. Blood flooded her mouth and she gagged on the metallic taste. Dumb bitch, Malachi sneered. Sarah opened her mouth, trying to scream again. She had to draw attention to herself and alert their pack. As her lips parted, Malachi's finger fell into her mouth and she sputtered a moment before latching her teeth onto his digit. Malachi howled in pain, allowing his death grip loosening. Lark, she shrilled desperately, drawing out her sister's name. Shut up, Malachi sneered, pulling her in tightly again. She opened her mouth to holler again, not ready to give up on being found. Sarah gasped. her yell getting cut off as pain tore through her abdomen. Oh my God. She gurgled as the claws sank into her and a pained sob lodged in her throat. That is enough out of you, he insisted, his nails sinking deeper. Sarah held her breath, too afraid to move. There you go, good girl. You don't want me to go much deeper. Sure would. Be ashamed to nick an organ, Malachi purred. Come quietly and you'll live. Make another peep and you're dead. Her vision tunneled as he drew her backwards. No. Stay awake. Stay awake. Her eyes slipped closed despite her silent pleas. As darkness tugged her under, suddenly she heard the distinct howl of a wolf. Jean and Devin were coming. Stay awake. Stay awake. Her eyes refused to open, and blackness engulfed her. Vincent surged forward, lashing out at the wolf in front of him. He had to get to Sarah. Her blood-curdling scream still rang in his ears. His heart clenched in his chest as he realized he couldn't hear her anymore. Is she okay? Alive? The only way he would know for sure was if he took out the enemies who blocked his path to her. He tackled the wolf to the ground and snapped at him, trying to go in for the kill. His enemy writhed on the ground beneath him in a desperate attempt to get up, but Vincent refused to concede. Finally he pushed past the canine's defenses and sank his teeth into the wolf's fleshy throat. He whipped his head side to side until the wolf ceased its fighting. Before he could recover, another assailant rammed his side, thrusting him several feet across the asphalt. Vincent rolled with the momentum and quickly scurried to his feet. He caught the wolf midair as it lunged. Gnashing his teeth at the other man, he shoved him back. Landing on his feet, he circled his enemy. Howls erupted around them and Vincent chuffed, excitedly recognizing a few of the calls. His brother and Jean were on their way. He surged forward, claws outstretched, tackling the wolf to the ground. The enemy used his momentum against Vincent and rolled them over. Vincent wriggled, trying to gain the upper hand again. Come on, get to Sarah. The longer she was silent, the more concerned he became. He swung his clawed mitt at the wolf, catching him in the muzzle. The wolf growled, snarling violently at Vincent, but he reeled back and swiped his paw. Again, blood spurted out of his attacker's mouth, dribbling down onto him. Determined to end it, he struck again, this time digging his nails deep into the wolf's neck. His enemy gurgled, eyes glazing over as he slumped forward. Vincent rolled out of the way before the lifeless body fell on him and hopped to his feet. He scanned the area, ensuring it was safe for him to continue toward Sarah. Daniel tore into a wolf a few feet away, but the other wolves had vacated the area, more than likely moving to intercept the Harris packs. Vincent double-checked to ensure his brother didn't need his help before racing toward Sarah. The smell of copper permeated the air, causing his heart to lurch. Sarah! Snarls and growls ripped through the air. She had to be close since the smell of her blood was strong. Worse, she could be in the thick of the fighting. He pushed his aching body to run faster. Please be okay. He ducked his way through the fighting wolves. His pack seemed to have Malachi's men outnumbered. Now he just needed to find Sarah. Vincent inhaled sharply as his eyes darted around, trying to find her. He froze as he came across her lifeless form. Why isn't she moving? Is she okay? She wasn't dead. She couldn't be dead. Please be okay. Sprinting, he stopped in front of her, nudging her with his nose. Her body flopped lifelessly. Vincent whined as he licked her face, trying to wake her. She didn't move. He sniffed her face, frantically searching for a pulse. A steady thrum met his ears and he huffed, relieved. She was alive but needed medical help. As if sensing the urgency, one of the pack's jeeps rumbled down the road. As the vehicle approached, he quickly recognized the occupants. Devin drove with Lark in the passenger seat. The car came to a halt a few feet from him. Lark rushed out, falling to her knees as she bent down and rested her forehead against her sister's. Sarah? Sarah? She whispered desperately. Vincent whined and bumped Sarah's head with his as he ran his muzzle over Sarah's ear. Nothing. Let me see her, please, Devin ordered, looking to Lark, then Vincent. Begrudgingly, Vincent backed up, knowing Devin would take care of her. Lark pulled back from her sister, tears sliding down her cheeks. Keep an eye on my back, Devin instructed as he opened his medical bag. Vincent turned back to the fighting as Lark stood and held a revolver with a shaky hand. Vincent held his breath, anxiously waiting for Devon to finish whatever he was doing to Sarah. The minutes stretched on endlessly. Finally, Devon rocked back on his heels and looked up at him and Lark. She's stable. I'm going to get her up and back to the ranch. Devon gingerly lifted Sarah up into his arms. Come on, Vincent. Jean's got this covered. Devon spoke to his brother, glancing at the ongoing fight. Vincent bobbed his head up and down and raced forward to the jeep. He hopped into the still open passenger door, taking a seat in the trunk area. Devon and Lark laid Sarah carefully across the back seat. Her arm fell lifelessly onto the floorboards and Vincent whined. Sarah had to be okay. She was going to live and be all right. She had to be. He loved her. I love you, Sarah. You have to live. Vincent impatiently paced the hallway outside the infirmary. It had only been a few moments, but it felt like an eternity. Devon had forced him out of the room so he had space to work on Sarah. She hadn't woken up yet, and every minute she remained unconscious made him worry more. What if her injuries are severe? What if she doesn't wake up at all? His mind was riddled with horrifying questions. Questions he didn't want to even contemplate the answers to. Sarah was going to be okay. They'd overcome too much for her to fall now. She was the strongest person he'd ever met, and he couldn't imagine living in a world without her in it. He ran a hand through his matted hair and jammed his hands into the loner hoodie he'd gotten from another member of the pack. Vincent. His mother's broken voice drew him from his thoughts. He turned slowly and met his mother's hazel eyes. She gasped and stumbled back. Emily and Marcus caught her, helping to keep the elder wolf steady. How is this possible? She choked out as she rushed forward and pulled him into a hug. You're here. Alive. She kissed his cheek and forehead as she mumbled incoherently. Tears streamed down her face and her whole body shook with happy tears. My boy. It's okay, Mom, he said, holding her tight. Claire's body trembled uncontrollably under his fingers as she cried into his shoulder. He looked past her and met his twin's eyes. Emily's emerald eyes brimmed with unshed tears, her hand covering her mouth. Coming out of her daze, Emily lurched forward and joined in the hug. He held his family tight. Glad to be home again. Are you hurt? His mom asked, pulling back to appraise him. Her eyes narrowed, scrutinizing every visible mark. I'm okay, Mom, he promised. Thank heavens, she croaked, pulling him into another hug. She pulled back. Again, her eyes wide. Sarah? Is that Sarah in the infirmary? She asked. Panicked. Vincent nodded solemnly, and Emily placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Is she hurt bad? Claire gasped. I don't know. She was unconscious, he said, swallowing his emotions down. Sarah needed to be all right. She made it this far. She'll make it a little bit further. I still can't believe you are here. I thought I lost you, Claire said, shaking her head, still unbelieving. How did you get away from the Lunas? Vincent shrugged. Sarah, I don't know what I would have done without her. His eyes drifted to the shut door. He couldn't take his mind off his blonde companion. The only thing he wanted right now was to hear her soft, melodic voice so he would know she was fine. Claire followed his gaze and clasped his arm tightly with her hand. Worrying outside the door won't change anything. Let's get you something to eat and we'll check back in a few. I have a pot of chili brewing on the stove. She didn't wait for him to respond. Going into full mother mode, she pulled him down the hallway to the kitchen. Chapter 20. Sarah blinked through the fog as she slowly woke up. Her sluggish mind fought to piece together where she was and what happened. She remembered running and being caught and screaming. Then everything went blank. Where am I? What happened? Where is Vincent? Is he okay? She sat up quickly, desperately searching. Her head spun from the quick movement, causing her vision to go black. Hey, whoa, Lark's voice soothed as it came closer. You're okay, she said, carefully lowering Sarah to the bed. Sarah swallowed. Vincent wasn't in the room. Where is he? Tears blurred her vision. Calm down, sweetie, Lark coaxed, placing her cool hand on her sister's forehead. Vincent, Sarah croaked. Lark smiled, running her hand through Sarah's hair. He just left. Devon had to practically drag him out. He's been sitting in here the past 2 days. Non-stop. Vincent had sat with her to make sure she was all right. She smiled inwardly at the sentiment. He'd sat in her room for 2 days. Wait, I was out for 2 days. 2 days. Sarah whispered hoarsely. Lark nodded. You had a few deep puncture wounds in your abdomen but nothing vital was damaged. Devin thought your unconsciousness was mostly because of exhaustion. How do you feel? Sarah stared up at the ceiling, assessing herself. A little sore and stiff. But okay, she answered honestly. Even though her body had been through the ringer, she felt oddly well. Probably because I slept for 2 days straight. Good, Lark murmured as tears filled her eyes. What's wrong? Sarah worried. Did someone else get hurt? Had Jean been injured or worse? Lark closed her eyes and a few tears trickled down her face. I'm just so glad to have you here. Her voice broke and her bottom lip trembled. I never gave up hope you were alive. And when we found you, you were so still. Thought I lost you again, she sniffled. Sarah's hand instinctively went to her side, gingerly touching the spot where the alpha had left his mark. I'm okay. It's okay, she assured as Lark bent down, pulling her into a tight embrace. Sarah cringed slightly in her sister's death grip but didn't want to move either. Never do that to me again, Lark said, pulling back and giving her sister a stern look before grinning and squeezing her again. I won't, she promised. It was a promise she would do anything to keep. But there was still danger out there, or was there? What happened to Malachi? After I passed out? Malachi, she whispered. Dead. Jean took care of him and the rest of his pack. Jean took a group of men up to the Lunas place yesterday afternoon. It was abandoned, he said. There appeared to have been lots of fighting for dominance after the Lunas fell. The place was completely destroyed. Lark let out a long breath. It's over. It's over, Sarah repeated. She closed her eyes, relaxing completely against her sister. They were finally safe. Lark pulled back as the door creaked open. Sarah's heart jumped in her chest. Hoping it was Vincent. She looked up expectantly and had to suppress a frown. When Devin walked in. Wrong, brother. You're up. How are you? Devin asked, coming to the bed to examine her. Lark scooted back to make room for Devin, but took Sarah's hand into hers as she nervously worried her lower lip. I'm okay, Sarah whispered hoarsely, trying to assure her big sister. No dizziness or nausea? Devin asked, shining a light into her eyes. Sarah blinked as dots blurred her vision from the bright light. A little dizzy when I first sat up, but I'm good now, she explained, her voice finally returning. Any pain? Devin asked, finally flicking the light off. Nothing horrible. Lark swallowed hard, squeezing Sarah's hand tighter. Is she going to be okay? She whispered, looking at Devin expectantly. I want to monitor your stomach. The puncture wounds looked good when I checked them earlier this morning, but we'll need to keep an eye out for any festering. Other than that, your x-rays and MRI came back fine. With some time and rest, you'll be back to normal, Devin explained. Was I in the hospital? Sarah asked, furrowing her brows in confusion. How had she gotten back to the ranch then? No, Devin replied. We got the equipment in 2 days before you arrived. With everything happening, Jean and I decided we needed a real infirmary here. Well, glad I could help break in your new equipment, Sarah teased, hoping to ease some of Lark's tension. Devin gave her an odd look, but only shook his head. Lark chuckled lightly. Under her breath, her shoulders finally slumping from their tight, rigid stance. She's going to be okay, Devin said, placing a hand over Lark's. Sarah followed his hand, taking in the extra diamond-encrusted wedding band on Lark's hand. Her eyes widened. She'd almost completely forgotten about the wedding. Is that the ring? Sarah grinned. Lark held her hand out. Yeah. Isn't it beautiful? Lark gushed, beaming. Congratulations. I'm so happy for you, Sarah exclaimed, throwing her arms around Lark. Devin cleared his throat and took a step back from them. I'm going to go check on Daniel and Nora, he said, excusing himself. Lark pulled back and gave her husband a tender kiss before taking Sarah's hands again. Devin nodded to Lark and exited. As the door clicked shut, she realized what he'd said. Oh my God. Are Daniel and Nora okay? Her stomach lurched violently as she berated herself for forgetting about them. A little banged up too, but they'll be all right, Lark assured. Sarah let out a relieved breath. We all made it home relatively unscathed. Thank goodness. Lark gave Sarah an appraising look and smiled. You seem better. Sarah frowned, confused, her muddled brain taking a minute to comprehend. I mean your demeanor. You seem like your old self before? She trailed off. In a whisper. Sarah shook her head in understanding. I am, oddly enough, being chased by crazy werewolves helped me realize how much I wanted to live. And Vincent, he was great. He really helped me look at everything in a whole new light. If it was not for him, I wouldn't have made it, she admitted. Vincent was her rock and so much more. You and Vincent must have really bonded. I've never seen him so serious and worried before, Lark acknowledged. Sarah nodded, wondering how much Lark knew of their relationship. But how much could she know when I don't know what our relationship is? He'll probably want to know you're awake, Lark added when Sarah said nothing. Sarah trembled with anticipation at the thought of seeing him. She really wanted to see him, to know he was alive and well with her own eyes. Do you want me to go get him for you? Lark offered. Yes, she answered quickly. But can I get cleaned up first? She asked. Shower wouldn't wash away the cuts and bruises, but at least she would feel better afterward. Sure. Let me help you to the bathroom. Thanks, Sarah said. Butterflies fluttered in her belly as she gingerly turned to climb out of bed. She couldn't help but wonder if things would be different between her and Vincent now that they were home. She really hoped not. Whatever they had, she wasn't ready to let it go. She'd never be ready to let it go. Vincent shoveled the chips and sandwich into his mouth as quickly as possible. Lark and Devon insisted he leave Sarah's room to shower and eat, but he couldn't wait to get back. She was going to wake up soon, he could feel it. Although Devon assured him she was fine, he wouldn't stop worrying until he could stare into her vibrant sapphire eyes again. Thinking of Sarah made him eat faster. His mouth was so full he couldn't ask Lark about Sarah when she entered. He chewed faster, making his jaw ache, and finally swallowed. Sarah? He asked anxiously, taking a drink of Coke to wash the food down. She's awake, Lark beamed. And she's asking to see you. Is she okay? He asked, already walking to the door. She seems to be. Devon already checked her over and cleared her. Lark continued happily. She stepped forward, blocking his path to the door, and pulled him into a hug. Thank you. Vincent flustered at her outburst. It's okay. You don't need to thank me. I know. I'm just glad to have you both back, she replied, giving him a small smile. Go see her, she slapped him playfully. I know you want to. Vincent didn't need to be told twice. He hurried up the stairs, taking them two at a time. Sarah's awake and asking for me. His day wasn't so glum anymore. The closer he got to Sarah's room, the more unease rolled through him. How am I supposed to act? He would just have to take it in stride and pray she gave him some clue how she felt. He wiped his clammy hands before slowly pushing the door open. He let out a long breath, seeing with his own eyes that she was okay. Sarah looked up at him with a grin. Hey, she greeted. You look good, he acknowledged. Her long blonde hair was wet and brushed back from her face. The light blue tank and gray pants fit her curves perfectly. She was exquisite. I'm covered in cuts and bruises, she mumbled, tucking her locks over a particularly nasty mark on her shoulder. You're still beautiful, he admonished, shutting the door behind him. Thanks, she smiled shyly. How are you? He asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. I'm glad to see you. It's been a long morning, she answered as she played with the quilt. She's nervous, he realized. But why? Say something. The way I figure it, you had it easy, sleeping beauty. Sarah giggled, meeting his eyes. Are you okay? Fast healer. I'm good as new, he promised. Lucky you. They both chuckled before falling into a long silence. Vincent shifted on the bed, contemplating what to say. Their relationship had evolved, at least for him, but her nervousness made him question what she felt. What if she is antsy about how to let him down? Sarah opened her mouth but never got to say anything. A knock thudded against the door before it creaked open. I brought you some soup, Lark announced, eyeing the two of them. Vincent hopped up from the bed. He wasn't sure what he'd been expecting during this visit, but this wasn't it. He needed to think of the right way to tell Sarah how he felt and pray she felt the same way, but he didn't know how to express his feelings and he didn't want to scare her. I should let you eat, he explained, backtracking to the door. Sarah's face fell. I'll come back later, he promised, clutching the doorknob. Oh, okay, she whispered. Did he upset her? That hadn't been his intent. After dinner, he added, finally getting a smile from her. He sighed, glad the glum expression had left her face. See you then, she replied, giving him a tight lips. Chapter 21. Sarah jumped at the sharp rasp on her door. The knob twisted and the door creaked open. She held her breath, her pulse beating faster, anticipating the man who would enter. The door opened and Jean stepped in. Her heart fell, but she forced a smile, still eager to see her visitor, even if it wasn't the man she'd been waiting for all afternoon. Hey, she grinned as Jean shut the door behind him. I'm glad to see you up, he smiled. The bed dipped down as he sat next to her and pulled her into a hug. I wanted to come sooner, but I got held up, he explained. Lark told me you went to New Mexico, Sarah acknowledged. I'm glad you're here now. Just tying up a few loose ends from your brilliant idea. I wasn't sure how the plan was going to work out, but it went off better than I imagined, Jean said, pulling back. He tucked a finger under her chin, evaluating her. I'm just glad you came out relatively unscathed. Me too. Speaking of unscathed, I hope Lark and Devon didn't give you too much hassle about keeping us a secret from them. She worried. Jean smiled. Not too bad. It was more Claire than anyone else. She's taken everything really hard. Vincent's had it rough too. She has barely let him out of her sight. She even sat with him some of the time he was keeping a vigil by your bed. Oh, maybe that's why Vincent hadn't come by yet. At least she hoped that was the reason. They say losing a child is one of the hardest things a parent could ever face, Jean shrugged. I'd be beside myself if something happened to Adrian. I'm sorry we put you through that. Put everyone through that, Sarah apologized. It wasn't your fault, he reminded. At least not entirely. Besides, I understand why you did what you did, and that's why I kept it quiet. Did it work? Our plan? Sarah asked anxiously. Had all their pain and suffering paid off in the end? She leaned forward, waiting for his answer. It did. The team I took to New Mexico had a lot of cleaning up to do. From what I can tell, what wolves survived the fighting for dominance fled. We took out the remnants of Malachi's pack while you were sleeping too. Sounds like I missed everything, Sarah replied. It would have been nice to see everything through. Nah, you needed the rest, he smiled. Jean turned to the door a second before someone knocked. Talia came too, he explained as she entered. Hi, how are you feeling? Natalia greeted as she entered, carrying Adrian on her hip. The she-wolf took a seat on the bed next to Jean. Good. How are you? Sarah asked, reaching out to take Adrian's soft, tiny hand in hers. It has been a trying few days, but things are looking up, Natalia smiled, resting her head against Jean's shoulder. They are, aren't they? Sarah breathed, relaxing against the pillows. Their enemies were all but obliterated. Even if there were fragments, they wouldn't have the same hold that the Lunas or Juarez's had. They were safe and could live freely and undisturbed. Vincent bounded up the stairs. The farmhouse was finally quiet and mostly everyone was going to bed. Sarah would be alone, he hoped. Visitors had been in and out of her room all day, making it hard for him to visit her uninterrupted. He wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans as he walked down the hallway. After everything they'd been through, it was silly for him to be nervous, but it was the unknown that worried him. He was treading into unfamiliar territory. Relationship. Sarah wasn't just any woman, she was the woman, and he had to make sure she understood that. It would also help if she felt the same way she does. Even if she had said it meant nothing, her actions conveyed something different. He could see it in her eyes and the fear in her voice when they'd reunited at Luna's. There was nothing to be afraid of. Then why am I so nervous? Vincent inhaled deeply and knocked on her bedroom door. Come in, Sarah's soft voice called. Vincent twisted the knob and entered, closing the door behind him. His breath caught. Sarah sat on the bed in a tank top and tiny shorts. Her knees were drawn into her chest, accentuating her long silky legs. She was stunning and, man, did he love her. I was wondering if you were coming, Sarah said quietly. Sorry, he apologized. You had a lot of visitors and my mom kept me busy. It's okay, she whispered, not meeting his eyes. Is she mad at me? I should have come sooner. I just thought it would be better for us to talk alone. he stammered, not entirely sure what he should say to her to ease the situation. Sarah looked up at him, her brows lifting into her hairline in question. Vincent shut his eyes and shook his head. This was not going the way he envisioned. Not that he'd really known what he was going to say, but that was beside the point. Think. I thought it would be nice to talk away from prying ears. It's been just you and me for the past week. It's kind of hard to acclimate, he explained. Sarah gave him a small smile. I got used to the quiet. Well, it wasn't always quiet. She trailed off. I know what you mean, he said. Sarah swallowed, looking down at her quilt, then back to him. I've been thinking. She paused and sighed. Vincent balled his hands and held his breath. Whatever she said next would either make his day or break his heart. He probably deserved the heartache. Goodness knows he's caused enough of it himself. But didn't he deserve happiness too? I was thinking about going back to school after Christmas. And she looked up at him, her chest heaving. I was hoping you would come with me. You know, like we talked about. She wanted him to come with her. Did that mean what he thought it did? There's off-campus housing and we could get an apartment, she continued, looking away from him. Sarah nervously plucked at the blanket again. Vincent couldn't help but stare at the beautiful woman before him who was offering him a future with her. It couldn't be real. Sarah was choosing him, and he would do everything in his power to keep her safe and happy. Sarah cleared her throat, drawing him from his thoughts. I mean, you don't have to. It was just an idea, she mumbled, her cheeks flushing. Wait, why is she backtracking? Probably because you haven't said anything. I would love to, he replied, sitting down on the bed. He curled his finger under her chin and tilted her face up. Sarah, I want to be wherever you are. I love you, he said, and then held his breath. Sarah leaned in and pressed her soft lips against his. I love you too, she whispered against his mouth. Vincent relaxed, running his fingers into her long flaxen strands. She loved him. His heart swelled with joy at the revelation. Sarah was his everything, and he would do anything for her. So does that mean you'll come with me? Sarah asked, smiling. I don't want to be anywhere else, he admitted. Home was where she was. Good. She pecked him again. In that case, will you stay with me tonight? Just hold me. Sarah scooted over to the center of the bed. Vincent slipped off his shoes, and they climbed under the covers. She sighed deeply as he wrapped an arm around her. This is right, he thought as he closed his eyes. He could spend the rest of his life like this. Sarah bolted up at the thumping knock on her door. Vincent stirred next to her and sat up on high alert until he realized where they were. She couldn't help but wonder how long it would take them to get used to the idea of being safe. Hey, Sarah, Lark started as she entered, a tray in her hand. Oh, she flustered, her eyes drifting to Vincent. Morning, Vincent greeted with a grin. Lark stared for a minute, then blinked and continued toward the bed. I brought you breakfast. I didn't realize you would have company. I was just leaving, Vincent said, climbing out of bed. Sarah frowned, immediately missing his warmth. She wanted nothing more than to just stay in bed with him all day. I'll be back in a little bit, he promised as he strolled to the door and left. Sarah scooted back against the pillows as Lark plopped down next to her. Hi, she said, smiling shyly at her sister. Lark's wide eyes met hers and she shook her head. Do I want to know? Sarah shrugged. We are together. I love him, she answered her sister. Together? Wow, this happened while you were gone. Lark asked, surprised. A lot happened while we were gone, Sarah defended. It was just the two of us, and all we had was each other. We learned a lot about each other. I understand that, but it doesn't seem fast to you? Lark asked quietly. I mean, Preston hasn't been gone that long. I'm happy for you, don't get me wrong, but I don't want you to jump into anything too soon either. He makes me happy, Lark. I feel alive, she said sincerely, needing her sister to understand. Lark grinned. You do seem to be happy. If he's the reason for your chipper mood, then I'm happy for you. She paused and looked away, biting her lip. I know he spent the past few days worrying about you, but are you sure he feels the same way? I mean, he's not exactly known for being a relationship person. Sarah nudged Lark and laughed, hoping to ease her sister's nerves. He does. I just wanted to make sure. Lark laughed, relieved. His reputation isn't The greatest, she reiterated. His reputation is going to change, Sarah promised. He is a one-woman man. From here on out. And he's coming to school with me this winter. You're going back to school? Lark asked. Yes. It's time I move forward with my life, she answered honestly. Lark pulled her into a tight hug. Sarah hugged her sister happily, glad that Lark had easily overcome her unease. Things were indeed looking up. The rest of her life was starting. Vincent toweled off, tossing on some boxers and jeans. He ran a hand through his damp hair and opened the bathroom door. A familiar, delicious scent met his nose, and he inhaled as a grin slipped over his face. Sarah. She was in his room, trailing her scent all over his possessions, and he couldn't be more thrilled. Has anyone ever told you that you take really long showers? She said, patting the bed. The way I see it, I have a few days to make up for, he teased. I think you exhausted those tonight, she joked, sliding over as he sat down. The bed dipped beneath him and he brushed up against Sarah's silky skin. Are you worried I won't leave you any hot water when we move away? Because there is an easy fix to that, he commented. What's that? She inquired, quirking her brow. We shower together. Sarah trembled and he chuckled, relishing in the way he could turn her on. With a simple comment. I think I can live with that, she said, burrowing into his chest. Vincent wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. Having her pressed against him was perfect. He couldn't imagine a more wonderful sensation. The realization drew his mind back to this morning and how Lark found them. What did Lark say after I left? How was your talk with Lark this morning? He asked nervously. Lark was important to Sarah, and he knew Lark's opinion would matter to Sarah, and to Devon. He would never give up Sarah, but he didn't want any rifts either. Good. She was surprised. But in the end, she just wants to see me happy. Sarah twisted so she could look up at him. Were you worried about her approval? Well, yeah, actually. I know how much you two care about each other, he admitted. I understand. But there is nothing to worry about. Like I said, we look out for each other, but ultimately we just want to see each other happy. She grinned, kissing him gently on the lips. I was thinking we should go apartment hunting in a few weeks, she said, changing the subject. Apartment hunting. To think that would have scared him only a few months ago. Yet today it excited him. Any chance we can find one by some trees where I can run. We'll find something we both love, she promised, kissing him again. Vincent pushed his fingers through her hair, deepening the kiss so he could taste her luscious lips. As long as he had Sarah, he would be happy anywhere. Epilogue. 5 years later. Sarah watched Lark in the mirror as she curled one of Sarah's long blonde locks. Her sister's swollen belly brushed against her shoulder as she reached for a bobby pin. She smiled at her reflection, as she was getting married to the man she loved. Are you ready? Lark asked, meeting her gaze in the mirror. Yes, she answered confidently. I was a nervous wreck the day of my ceremony, Lark admitted. Really? Sarah asked, surprised. Lark and Devon were soulmates. She couldn't imagine why her sister would have been nervous. Not because of committing to Devon, more afraid I'd trip and fall going down the aisle. Thank God Jean was there to walk me down. And also it was hard not having you mom or dad there. I just wondered what everyone would have thought, she said, quietly grabbing another pin. I do wish mom and dad were here, she admitted out loud. But I know they're here in spirit. I know they would be happy for both of us, Sarah sighed. Sadly, she and Vincent had been together the past 5 years. He was the love of her life. Sarah laughed as an image of her father scolding Vincent popped into her head. I can imagine Dad giving Vincent a hard time for not proposing sooner. Lark laughed out loud. You're right. But I think it's nice that he waited until you graduated and got a job, Lark added. How is your job, by the way? I feel like I've hardly seen you since you came back home. If you're not at work, you're locked in a bedroom with Vincent, Lark scolded before pointing to her belly. You better be careful. You'll end up like me, she teased. Sarah laughed out loud. And how is my nephew doing today? Ready to make an appearance, Lark mumbled. He's ready, or you are ready? Sarah asked, giggling. This was Lark's first pregnancy, and the closer she got to her due date, the antsier she became. I know I am, just waiting on him now. 2 weeks at most. The midwife won't let me go over 41 weeks, Lark sighed wistfully. And you're sure about the home birth? Sarah asked worriedly. If the time ever came for her to give birth, she would want the comforts of a hospital and drugs. Lark nodded. We have to be careful. There is a good chance this baby is a werewolf, and if there are any genetic differences, we don't want a hospital to pick up on those when they do their testing. Besides, Devin has taken so many courses now, he's practically an MD. Not to mention my pregnancy has been flawless, which is a good indicator my labor should go smoothly too. Both women turned at a knock on the door. Come in, Sarah called. The knob twisted and Claire, Natalia, Emily and Nora walked in. Oh my, Claire gushed, clasping her hand to her chest. You look astonishing, she told Sarah. And Lark, you look beautiful too. Thank you, Sarah smiled. Thanks, Lark blushed, her hand instinctively going to her stomach. Where are the kids? Sarah asked as Nora shut the door. Jean has Adrian and Preston, Natalia answered. He's getting them ready. Sarah smiled. It hadn't been much of a surprise when Natalia and Jean named their first son after Preston. She found it fitting. It would have made Preston proud to have his nephew named after him. And Richard is with Marcus, Emily piped up, drawing Sarah from her thoughts. Sarah nodded in acknowledgement. Emily and Marcus had named their toddler after Rick, the man who allowed them sanctuary and the right to be together. Are you sure the guys know what they're doing? Lark teased. I gave detailed directions, Emily answered. And there are 5 of them. Together, they should be able to figure it out. Nora added with a laugh. Let's hope so, Claire smiled. We wanted to see if you two needed any help. Of course, Sarah and Lark said in unison. Sarah settled back into the chair as the women all helped Lark to finish pinning up her hair. Today was perfect. Maybe her parents weren't here, but she had family with her. And she was going to marry, mate, whatever you wanted to call it, her best friend. Vincent adjusted his suit as he waited for the ceremony to start. His brothers, Jean and Marcus, surrounded him, as well as the 3 boys in the family. They were all having their own conversations while he awaited his future. He couldn't wait for it to begin. He'd been waiting for years to finally claim Sarah as his completely, and today was the day it would happen. The mating ceremony would cement their commitment to each other and mark her as his. Wolf inwardly jumped for joy at the thought. Neither he nor his wolf could wait to spend the rest of his life with Sarah. Jean's voice drew him from his thoughts. We're almost ready. Good, Vincent grinned. Who would have thought you'd ever settle down? Marcus joked, clapping him on the back. I've been a one-lady man for the past 5 years, he interjected. He'd gone from a womanizer to a man in love virtually overnight. Looking back, he didn't miss the days of hopping from one woman to another. Sarah was everything he could ever want and more. Speaking of lasting relationships, Vincent said, changing the subject, has anyone noticed how much time Mom and Sean have been spending together? The wolf had moved to Abilene after Claire had taken a trip to New York to visit some of the packs up there. He does seem to make her happy, Devin admitted. Vincent nodded. It was nice to see his mother smile again with someone other than family. And Sean seemed to be a fine wolf. Maybe another ceremony was on the horizon. As long as his mom was happy, that was all that mattered. Adrian tapped his knee. Does this mean you and Aunt Sarah are going to have a baby too? Adrian asked. Vincent chuckled. Not anytime soon. Aunt Sarah's just getting started with her new job. Maybe in another year or 2, but you should ask Uncle Daniel when he and Aunt Nora are going to spit out a few kids, he teased, winking at his brother. Daniel rolled his eyes. Nora had let it slip to Sarah she was pregnant about a week ago. But Daniel and Nora weren't ready to go public with the information yet. From what he understood, Nora and Daniel had barely found out themselves. And there were concerns with some of the medications Nora took and how it could affect both her and the baby. Vincent just hoped it worked out for them. His thoughts were interrupted as Marcus drew the meeting room door open. I think it's time to head out, he said, motioning with his arms to the front room where everyone was waiting for the ceremony. Vincent shot up, eager to see Sarah. He hadn't seen her since last night. It was her idea, not his. Something about bad luck. I take it you're ready, Jean laughed. Beyond ready, he answered. Well, let's get you to your mate, Devin said, clapping him on the back. Vincent filed out the door behind the other guys, watching as they took their seats except for Devin. He'd asked his brother to officiate the ceremony for them, and Devon had been honored. Do you remember how this works? Devon asked. Yes. Do you? He asked, wagging his brow playfully. Well, this is only my 4th ceremony ever. And I only officiated over Jean and Natalia's, which was almost 5 years ago, so. Haha, you're so funny, he said dramatically as they came to a stop in front of the altar. Everything's going to be perfect, Devon assured, motioning with his head to the door. Vincent held his breath as Lark, Talia, Emily, Nora, and his mom hurried in and took their seats in the front row. His eyes darted to the doorway as Sarah peered. She was a vision in white, an angel, his angel. Her long locks were up and out of her face, showing off her sapphire eyes. The dress she wore clung to her chest and hips before flowing out as it neared her feet. As she approached, he couldn't help but wonder how he had gotten so lucky. Sarah was a wonderful person, a woman who saw him for who he was. She was a fighter and a romantic. Sarah was the woman of his dreams, and he intended to show her how much he loved her for the rest of his life. Today his forever started. Jean set the book on the nightstand and carefully adjusted the covers around. Adrian. The boy let out a tiny content sigh as he stirred ever so slightly with Jean's movements. Jean smiled as he carefully stood up from the bed and let out a relieved sigh when Adrian stayed asleep. It had taken longer than usual to get the rambunctious 5-year-old to calm down. There had been a lot of excitement and cake with the ceremony today, and the little guy had stayed up well past his usual bedtime. Jean turned out the light and took one last glance at the sleeping boy before heading into the hallway. He shut the door behind him and met Talia's brown eyes as she made her way out of Preston's room. She smiled at him, meeting him in the hallway. Preston asleep too? He asked, pecking her lips. Yes, Talia breathed. I'm ready for bed as well, she whispered, nuzzling against him. Jean wrapped an arm around her as he led them down the hall to their room. We should be done with mating ceremonies for some time now, he reasoned. No one else is in a serious relationship, at least not that I'm aware of. And Maddie and Amelia are still a bit young to find their mates. Today was fun, but I'm not sure the boys can handle all the commotion that comes with it, Natalia mentioned as Jean closed the door behind them. And we definitely need to watch Adrian around the cake. I have a feeling that sneaky booger stole quite a few pieces, Natalia laughed. I agree, Jean said, grinning. Natalia sighed, sobering. There is something else, she commented, going to the dresser and pulling out a silky nightgown. She turned toward him, apprehension clear on her features. I spoke with Antonio's mother this evening. She wants to come here for a visit. Oh, Jean hesitated. He understood that Adrian's paternal side of the family was anxious to see him again. Natalia and Adrian had visited a few years ago, but he wasn't thrilled about them coming to the ranch. Hosting humans at their home could end in disaster. I tried to convince her we would plan a trip out there, but she was hoping to see him sooner rather than later, Natalia explained. It has been a while. And she said she wants to meet Preston as well. Jean nodded. I would prefer to go there, but I remember how unhappy Adrian was traveling at such a young age. I don't suppose she'd be keen to wait another year for us to visit, Jean offered, although he already knew the answer. Natalia gave him a pointed look. I doubt it, she sighed. They are like second family to me. I just wish there was a way to host them here without putting the pack at risk. Jean grasped her hands in his. Antonio's family had been overly welcoming of him when Natalia had introduced them. He had been quickly accepted into the family and felt comfortable around them. And he couldn't deny a grandmother the right to see her grandson. Tell her to come. We'll figure it out. We always do. Besides, it will be a good practice run. If we are really going to expand the ranch and purchase the land for sale on the far eastern side of the property, we're going to have to get used to humans being around. A dude ranch is going to bring in lots of people. True, Natalia conceded. But they won't be staying here. No, but it will be good practice for us too. Tell her to come. I'd rather have slip-ups around family than strangers, Jean explained. He couldn't be certain, but he was very confident the family would keep quiet for Adrian and Talia's sake if there were any incidents. I'll speak with her tomorrow, Natalia said, squeezing his hands. Good. I'm glad that's settled. He pulled Natalia down on top of him as he lay back on the bed. I feel like I haven't seen you all day, he murmured against her lips as she bent down to kiss him. It has been a crazy day, she reiterated. Let's unwind, he whispered, flipping them over. Nora flushed the toilet and sat back on the cool tile floor as she let out a long breath. She closed her eyes and cursed the person who named it morning sickness. If it were only in the morning, then she wouldn't be cowering in the bathroom at dinner time. So much for keeping the pregnancy a secret from everyone. She ran a hand through her hair and closed her eyes. She supposed it was flu season. Most people would hopefully chalk it up to illness. It wasn't that she didn't want to tell people about the baby, she did. The problem was very few people on the ranch were aware of her medical condition, a condition that could jeopardize her health and her baby's if not closely monitored. The worst part was she could pass the condition on to her baby. She shuddered at the thought. The baby was far from planned, but now that she had a life growing inside her, she wanted to protect it. Devin had referred her and Daniel to a doctor, and her physician seemed to be optimistic, but she supposed it was the motherly thing to worry. Speaking of worrying, a shadow danced under the doorway, followed by a knock. Nora! Daniel called from the other side of the door. Nora reached up and unlocked the door, but did not try to get up. She wasn't sure she was ready for that yet. It's unlocked. The door creaked open and Daniel stepped in and closed the door behind him. He kneeled down next to her, placing a warm hand on her face. You okay? Nora huffed but nodded anyway. The nausea had passed at least. I think so. You want me to tell my mom we can't stay for dinner? He questioned, plopping down next to her. No. I think I'm better now. It was the smell of antiseptic that got to me, she explained. Daniel's brow crinkled in confusion. Adrian skinned his elbow and Natalia was cleaning him up in the kitchen, she explained. It should be better now. At least it wasn't the food that turned my stomach this time. We can go home if you're not up to it. I'll make you soup and crackers, he offered. Soup and crackers had been her diet for the past few weeks. It was one of the only things that never turned her stomach. Actually, the chicken and dumplings your mom is making sounds good, she admitted. It had smelled good too. Everything had been fine until Natalia had opened the bottle of alcohol. She pitted Adrian. That had to hurt, she thought offhandedly. Okay, if you're sure, Daniel said, kissing her forehead. Nora smiled and leaned into him. She knew Daniel was terrified at the thought of becoming a father and even more scared about the potential health risks to her and the baby, but he was being very supportive of her and doing everything he could to keep her comfortable. He'd even jotted down and asked a dozen questions at her appointment the other day, which was not like him at all. We should probably go ahead and tell everyone. Your mom, Talia. Emily, everyone saw me dart off into here. They're going to question it, she whispered. This also wasn't the first time she'd sprinted out of a room to get sick. I thought we were going to wait until you were past the first trimester? Daniel asked. I'm 9 weeks now, and I feel a little better after seeing the doctor, she admitted. Seeing the baby on the monitor and hearing the strong, steady heartbeat had helped. You know my mom is going to be excited, he replied, giving her a pointed look. I know, and she should be. She's going to have another grandchild. Nora smiled. All right, let's go tell everyone. Daniel stood up and offered her his hand, pulling her up. You still feeling okay? He asked. Nora nodded. Let me just freshen up first. Daniel opened the bathroom door. I'll see you in a second. He kissed her temple before leaving the room. Nora went to the sink and splashed some water onto her face and quickly rinsed out her mouth. As she stared into the mirror, a sense of calm washed over her. Everything was going to be okay. A few months later, Emily peered over Marcus' shoulder as he typed away at his computer. He'd taken on the marketing for the ranch and was in charge of setting up the website. It's getting late, she said, bending down so she could whisper in his ear. You're not going to make me go to bed alone, are you? Marcus twisted in the chair and captured her lips as he tugged her into his lap. Of course not. I never want you going to bed alone. It's after 11, she pointed out. Is it? Marcus asked, his brow furrowing as he turned to look at the monitor. I guess I got wrapped up in my work. It's okay. I know how excited you are about doing this for Devin and Jean. It's a great opportunity for you, she reasoned. Still, I don't want to neglect you or Rick, Marcus acknowledged. You aren't, she assured. I was just teasing you. Marcus spent a lot of time with them, which is how he ended up doing most of his work while she put Rick to bed at night. How are things coming with the purchase of the land and the building contracts? She asked curiously. Good. If all goes according to plan, I think we can break ground on the building in the spring, Marcus said. That's fantastic. It is. And it will bring in lots of revenue for the pack too. That's good. With all the new members out here, we're going to need to maximize revenue, Emily mentioned. I can't believe how quickly the pack has grown the past few years. I can, Marcus admitted. Now that Juarez and Luna are gone, all the wolves who were chased away from their homes are seeking packs. No one wants to be lone wolf. True. I just hope the probationary period and questioning are enough to keep us safe from all these unknown wolves. Some of Juarez's and Luna's men are still out there, Emily said with a shiver. Devin and Jean have it under control, Marcus assured. And we took out all the big shots in Juarez and Luna's packs. We are at peace and things are going to stay that way. The pack is thriving. Look at all the pregnancies and babies being born. For the first time in years, a female wolf is going to be the firstborn. That has to mean something. The doctor isn't sure that Daniel and Nora's baby is a girl, Emily commented. No, but it is a high probability. I can't even remember another couple that has happened to, Marcus explained. Speaking of babies, my heat cycle is coming again. I can feel it, Emily started. Heat flushed her cheeks at the thought. Maybe we will be blessed with a little girl too, Marcus said, kissing her deeply. Emily melted into him as she threaded her fingers through his thick, black hair. A baby girl would be nice, but any baby was a blessing in her eyes. Lark peered up as the door to the cookie jar jingled. She smiled as Devin walked toward the cases. Let me guess, a blueberry muffin, she teased, already opening the door to pull out a muffin. How did you know? Devin smirked. Lark shrugged. I suppose I'm just lucky. What brings you here? Is everything okay with Wyatt? She asked, the smile slipping from her face. Had something happened to her son? No, she assured herself. Devin wouldn't be so laid back. It was her first week back to work after his birth, and she was still a little uneasy about leaving him. It's been a while since I stopped by to pick you up, Devin said. I thought it would be a nice surprise. Lark relaxed and smiled as she handed him the muffin. Let me just get my things. She turned to Megan, one of her employees. Do you need anything before I go? No, we're good here. Have a good evening, she said, waving her off. Lark quickly pulled her apron off and grabbed her coat and purse before hurrying to Devin. Her husband welcomed her with a kiss. I was thinking we could pick up Wyatt from my mom and maybe head out to Luigi's for dinner, he offered, leading them out of the shop. That sounds good, Lark said. She could already taste the lasagna. I know this first week back has been hard. I thought it would be nice for the three of us to have a little family time away from the pack, Devin said as he opened the car door for her. Lark hopped into the Jeep. It is hard to leave him, she sighed as Devin climbed in on the driver's side. You know you don't have to work, Devin replied. I know, but I want to. I can be a mom and have my business, she insisted. Once I get in the swing of things, it will be easier. It helps knowing Wyatt is with your mom. Claire loved being with her grandbabies every day, although with the way things were going, she wondered if the elder Alpha would have her hands full. Soon, Adrian and Rick were older and rowdy, and Preston and Wyatt were still quite young. Once Nora had her baby, which would give Claire 5 kids to care for. Even for an experienced mother, that had to be stressful. Not that Claire ever seemed frazzled. The Alpha always took things in stride and knew just what to do. I do plan on cutting back my hours, she said, turning to look at Devin. She worked a 50-hour week prior to Wyatt's birth. With Devin's hours as Alpha, their work lives had worked out nicely, but now she wanted to spend more time with Wyatt. You are the boss. Do what you feel is appropriate, Devin encouraged. I think I will, Lark beamed. I'm thinking a 35-hour work week and no weekends. Sounds good. I don't suppose there is any way you could be home more? I spoke to Daniel this afternoon, Devin replied. Lark turned to Devin with a questioning look. The two brothers had made great strides in repairing their relationship, but at times things were still tense. And Lark asked curiously when he didn't continue. With Nora's due date in a few months and Wyatt, I asked him if he would mind sharing beta duties with Vincent. Between the three of us, I think we can work out the duties so we all have a good home life, Devon explained. And Daniel was on board? Lark asked, holding her breath. Yeah, he thought it was a great idea. Lark let out a relieved breath. Of course he would be okay with it. Daniel wanted to spend time with his family as much as Devon. Did you ask him how Nora's appointment was? I did. Everything's progressing normally. So far as everyone can tell, they are going to have a healthy little girl. That's good. Lark smiled, happy for the other couple. Vincent was excited to be offered beta duties, and I think Sarah isn't going to be too upset about it, Devon said, changing the subject back to the previous topic. Sarah understands how things work. I think she'll be happy for Vincent. We'll give him a purpose. Besides, it isn't like how it was a few years ago. Vincent won't constantly be in danger because of a war, Lark acknowledged. Very true. I think Vincent has always wanted to be given more responsibilities. Lark nodded in agreement as they turned down the long drive to the ranch. She bit her lip, eager to hold her little boy. 10 hours was such a long time to go without seeing him, especially after spending the first 3 months with him. She hurried out of the vehicle and up the front steps. Claire greeted them in the entryway with Wyatt snuggled in her arms. Hey little guy, Lark cooed, carefully picking her son up and cradling her. Son. Devon peered over her shoulder as he wrapped an arm around her waist. How was his day? Lark asked Claire. Good. He just ate and got changed. Hopefully the two of you will be able to enjoy your dinner, Claire said. Thanks, Lark said as Devon grabbed Wyatt's bags. We'll see you tomorrow. Claire gave them both a hug before they left. Lark walked outside as Devon opened the car door for her. She leaned into the vehicle as she carefully adjusted Wyatt in his seat. Everything was perfect, she thought. She had the perfect husband, son, and life. There wasn't anything more she could ask for. Forbidden hope. She's been a prisoner in her home since her first heat. Emily. Emily is a rare female wolf and the alpha's daughter. Her father dictates everything about her life, including who her mate should be. Fate has other plans. Marcus is everything she could ever want in a mate. Her father doesn't approve and promises her to another pack. If she stays, she'll lose the love of her life. If she runs, she'll put everyone she loves in danger. Marcus. Every wolf dreams of finding their mate. Marcus can't help falling for the alpha's daughter. She is kind, caring, and beautiful. A relationship with her is forbidden. The alpha threatens his life if he pursues her further, but you can't help who you love. Running is their only chance to be together, but can he keep her safe from the wolves that will hunt them? Forbidden Hope is a prequel novella and can be read at any time during the series.